Great. All right, guys, welcome to today's Prospect Live event. We have Project Minerals today. It's Thursday, September 10th. We're really excited about this project. We're going to kind of dive into um, how we met the project. And what's really exciting about this one is just like our two Prospect Live events ago, we were working with a company from the Netherlands. Um, our Prospect Live event is truly international today. Dirk has been traveling all over the world. Yesterday, I talked with him. He was in Germany, and now he's in Switzerland joining us. So I'd like to thank him for taking the time to do this for us today so that we can really bring transparency to what his project is all about. The goal is about creating jobs across America. And, um, and Dirk's project is one of those really impactful projects that can make a big impact, not on just a state, but on our entire U.S. economy. So we're really excited about this project. To start off, here's today's goals. We're going to kind of meet our GSLI team and learn a little bit what GSLI does as a company and how we help companies, because we do have quite a few companies on here also join us to learn a little bit more how we can help them. We'll go through an overview of the project, and we'll talk about what are the basic parameters that the project's going to need to be successful, and all with the intent to help you be able to formulate and put together good responses and information that the project can evaluate and really hone in on some decisions they may have not thought about previously. And then we'll actually bring Dirk on today, and we'll talk with him, and we'll go through a series of questions that have been already submitted, and then we will at that time start fielding the questions from the listeners if they have any specific questions, and we'll break off into that question and answer session and answer all the questions. We do try to keep these somewhere between the 45-minute to an hour time limit to respect Dirk's time and to respect the communities and companies that have joined us today. So grab your coffee and we'll get started. So first of all, you might ask, should you be here at this Prospect Live event? If you're one of our clients, we have a network of communities that are a part of our GSLI site selection teams throughout the United States. Those are the companies that we first introduce to the projects and make sure and see if there's good alignment with what they have to offer. Do they have the necessary workforce? Do they have the necessary sites or buildings? And the things that really will ensure the success of the project when they decide on their location. We'll have some trial communities. We have some communities that aren't a part of our alliance, but we've invited in to listen and learn about the project. And if they have a good um, presentation or proposal that they can make a case that their community is good, we'd love to work with you a lot more closely, learn about your community, and hopefully bring you on to our alliance and put you directly in contact with the project. We also have observing companies and site locators. Those are really important to us as we continue to do our Prospect Live events. We want to share how we do these events and how they can participate, and we can assist in their site location. And we've got just communities that might not see an alignment because of the type of project because of the project parameters, but they'll be here listening, trying to learn what really makes projects tick. What are they looking for? What are they looking for in responses? What helps them make a decision? What are some of the tipping points that they're looking for in today's economy? And really become better stewards of how they submit on their own projects. So we want to welcome all of you here today to this event, and we're excited. Want to kind of tease, go ahead and mark your calendars. Next coming up is Project Pack USA. That's going to be happening in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're finalizing. I just spoke with them yesterday. I spent about an hour with the CEO. They're going to be using us for 2 facilities in the U.S., and they're going to be doing that over the next 4 years. They're looking for a 200,000 square foot facility, and it is a manufacturing and logistics. They do some very um, they have some very large clients in the U.S. and pretty much if you buy a package from Walmart or anything, it probably came from their plant. They're going to be creating 300 jobs with their facility, and their initial interest that they've shared with us is the Southwest and West, um, somewhat because of a customer base, but also because of the ability to build their customer base. So he has expressed to me that they're open to other opportunities throughout the U.S. if there's a good alignment. A couple housekeeping items first here. Make sure you're muted. When we have this many communities online, we want to make sure that there's no feedback or if you're eating potato chips or something like that, it's not coming across and interfering with the recording. We do record these events and then we post them on our site. It takes us about 48 hours to transcribe the event. So if you want to download a transcription and highlight the notes when you're preparing a proposal, we found that that's very helpful. And there will also be the submission link on that um, particular recording so that you can make an easy submission. There is a Q&A button where you can ask questions. As you come up with questions at any time, go ahead and put those into the Q&A box, and those will be queued up for me when we get to the Q&A section. If there's a quicker need, you can raise your hand, and I can go straight to you and address it, bring you on. I can either bring you on or I can ask the question. So we'll go through how to phrase your question so we know exactly where you are in the country when asking the questions. Just a reminder, as I mentioned, we are recording and transcribing the event. And if you need more information, Brooke, I'd like you to go ahead and put up the link so it's easy for the listeners to get in contact with us and find more information, not just about us, but about the projects. And that'll be an easy way for you to engage with us and get started. So meeting some of our team. This is truly a blessing for me today. I am Eric Kleinsorge. I'm the CEO and chairman of Global Site Location Industries. I've got my daughter on today, and I'm really excited that she's joined our team. She's been with us for about 8 months. And I guess a father's dream is to always know that you've raised your kids and they have the opportunity to help you build your company. And she's joined our project and research team and has actually communicated with Brad with Project Mineral Rocks and Dirk, and really has been instrumental in making this event happen today. And we've got Dirk. Dirk is the CEO, and as I mentioned, Dirk is in Switzerland today and is joining us via his computer. So a little bit about GSLI. A lot of people for the past 25 years has known us as World Economic Development Alliance. In our 25th year, I decided to rebrand our company to Global Site Location Industries. The purpose, communities really connected with us when we were World Economic Development Alliance. They understood what we did and what our purpose was. The companies, based on our name, really there was a disconnect. And once we changed over to Global Site Location Industries, it made sense to the companies that we're here to help them. And we're sponsored by the communities to help them be successful in their location. And for one reason, jobs. And when I founded the Alliance, I found it with one mission: to put expanding or relocating companies in touch with professionals and communities that can help them be successful. And throughout the nation, there are paid professionals, paid economic development professionals, whose job is to make these companies successful by helping them with research, helping them with data, and helping them make their decisions. So 25 years ago, I made a decision to build a company that connected those two and serve as the bridge between those two. And technology has truly shrunk or made that bridge shrink, so that there's more transparency between the projects, where in the past we used to just do email correspondence or snail mail correspondence. Now we can actually do these prospect live events and help both the company get in touch with the entire nation with one call, and the communities learn about a project without making multiple calls and taking up the project's valuable time. We do have an exclusive network of communities across the nation that are our ground force. When we need information, we do not ever claim to be experts on a particular region. We let those economic development offices serve as our experts. So the quicker we can introduce and put the companies in touch with the companies in touch with those communities, the better we feel we're serving both parties. Um, Communities in our network, they have the ability to submit and talk and work with as many projects throughout the year that they can. And as I said, guest communities are invited. They can submit on a project if there's a good alignment. They're allowed to submit on one project. And we feel that's important because we want to bring opportunities that some of our existing communities might not have to the projects, because the project's success is our biggest concern. I've posted some stats here over the years. We have been busy. We've identified over 2,000 projects. We've identified and created over 53,000 jobs over the 25-year period, 6.3 billion in capital investment, and over 31.8 million square feet of facilities that have been either built or bought through the years. We do house all of our projects within our project portal. Currently, we have 86 projects that we're helping find new homes for, and those projects can be found at www.gsliprojectportal.com. And if you just log in a guest, if you're not a client, you can kind of view and peruse all of our projects and see what projects align. If you're a company, you can kind of get an idea of the projects that we are assisting and working with. I'd like to say that there's no project really too small or too large. I know some of the projects lately have been on the larger side of the scale, but we also work with companies that only need 10,000 square feet of space and 10 employees. We feel that every job is important when it's created. So a little project insight. Again, I said I'm excited. Ashley Kleinsorge is my daughter, and I'm really blessed to have her a part of this team. And I'd also like to mention she's a hard worker. Today is her birthday, so if anybody wants to give her a shout out on the chat box for happy birthday, she'd be probably tickled about seeing everybody wishing her a happy birthday. But Ashley, I'm going to unmute you, and basically, what I'd like you to do is kind of give a little insight and perspective how we came in touch with Project Mineral Rocks, and what the process was, so people can kind of learn how we identify our projects and connect with companies.
Thanks, Dad. So, like you said, I'm Ashley Kleinsorge, and I've been with GSLI for 8 months now, but I mean, it's really been like I've been here for the past 25 years working with my father. So, it's been exciting putting all I've learned over the years into action. For those of you that don't know, our GSLI research team uses 7 different lead pillars for capturing intel and identifying projects that will create jobs ultimately. My first introduction to this project was through one of our pillars we use to identify possible projects. I identified that the company had future expansion plans in Canada and Europe, but they weren't really looking in the United States yet. So I kind of saw it as like an opportunity to bring an expanding company stateside. So at that point, I connected with Brad, the CFO from the company. He was really quick with following up with me and eager to learn what the United States has to offer for their project. I really do want to thank Brad, though, for being so quick with the responses and providing me all the information I needed about this project. He's been super quick with emailing back and forth, takes all of our phone calls. He's really just helped me through this entire process. Lots of projects are not as responsive and easy to connect with, so it's truly just been great. All around, he's been wonderful to work with, and we would not have gotten this live event organized without him, so he's made this process seamless. So you might ask how we found Project Minerals Rock, and we always like to educate our listeners on how we actually identify projects. We have 7 avenues or pillars, as we call, of lead generation strategies to identify projects. These pillars include email marketing campaigns, exhibiting at trade shows, internet research, telemarketing, utilization of media publication like our own, which is Global Trade Magazine, and community referral leads. So we have a team of people who handle our internet research, and they gave us a report on this company and their expansion project. And at that point, I reached out to Brad. These strategies help us identify growing companies to assist with site selection efforts, but not only that, our Alliance members have an opportunity to submit sites to us that we'll put in front of companies to consider. We've loved helping Brad and Dirk progress on their goals for this project, so we really do look forward to what opportunities exist for the new location, and we're very excited to host this meeting for them today.
All right, thanks. And by the way, happy birthday.
Thanks, Dad.
So let's talk about the project. Let's kind of go over, give you a brief overview of the project. I would say this project is fast tracked in terms of gathering the information and trying to evaluate some of their possibilities. We'll go into the time frame of when they actually want to do a project launch, but and the job creation is a little difficult because there's a building process and then there's the actual project once it gets formulated. So there's building jobs that will be created plus manufacturing jobs will be created, but 500 is a good estimate there. In terms of size requirements, we have identified, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, Dirk, but we've translated your hectares into acres, and it's roughly about 25 acres. Building type, I believe that it's pretty much going to be a build-to-suit facility because of the requirements of the facility and the specialization of the facility. And the time frame, again, it's rough and it's going to be easier to dive into it, but I would guesstimate somewhere between 12 to 18 months of trying to identify and make a good decision on their project. So we do have questions that have been submitted by the communities, and as we go through these, this is your opportunity. And I see Mickey, thank you for submitting a question. Go ahead and start submitting your questions as certain questions bring them up. Let us get through the Q&A of the questions that have been submitted, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A. And again, use your Q&A box to type in, and those will queue up for me. And once they're answered, I can complete the question. If some questions have been answered earlier, if someone joined us late, Brooke has typically put in the answers and just provided you the answer instead of re-asking the question. And whenever you do ask your question, please state your name and your location and then your question. That way, if I don't bring you on live to ask the question, I can at least get an idea of, and Dirk can get an idea of where you are located. So Dirk, I want to welcome you aboard. I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, Eric. I hope
Hey.
everyone can hear me. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot for inviting me to this.
You're more than welcome. And it's exciting. Like I said, I love technology, how we can communicate across countries now and across the world and bringing these events live. So we really appreciate you. I've caught you on a train. I've caught you, going to Germany and Saxony yesterday, and now you're in Switzerland. So I know your time is valuable. So thank you for stepping aside and hosting this and working with us on this event. I want to start off, if you could, give us a little background, and I know you've prepared some slides that you'd like to share, but if you could give us a little background about your vision and your company, and then we can kind of go into your slide deck, and you can share with that, and then we'll get into the other questions.
Of course, Eric, thanks. We are a lithium development company. So we are currently setting up operations for mining lithium out of the ground in Canada. Our project is in Ontario, just at the Great Lakes. It's a Lake Superior, which shows you that we are very, very close to the American border. Yeah? So it is a Canadian project, and what you are doing in this segment, you are usually having lithium in the ground with about 1% concentration. You take it off the ground, you concentrate it to a 6% so-called spodumene concentrate, and that concentrate now is your decision. What do you do with this? You could, for example, sell it to China, because at the moment, all of the lithium production that is really relevant for the modern batteries in the electric cars comes out of China. So there's a huge dominance of the Chinese in this market. This is the topic that some of you might have heard about already. Also the Americans, the US, but also the European Union have defined now lithium as a raw material, as a critical raw material that is strategically important, which means that the use of this should be in the country, and there should be no dependence on China. And based on these kind of decisions, and also based on the development that we are seeing, that the electric car industry is constantly growing. You see this in Europe even much stronger than in the US, but it will come the same way in the States. And based on this, we have made the decision some 9 months ago to go much more downstream, and not only produce a 6% lithium concentrate, but to go one step further, set up a large plant and produce a lithium chemicals product, which is called lithium hydroxide, which is a key ingredient for building a battery cell. And the battery cell is, of course, the key element of the battery block and of the electric engine that you have in the new electric and also in the hybrid vehicles. So we are trying to cover a key step in the raw material and chemicals supply for the battery cell producers and for the car producers like General Motors, Ford in your country, that are aiming to go fully electric.
Awesome. So do you have the ability to share your slide deck that you prepared?
Yes, some of the, just a second, it shows to me that you probably have to stop sharing your screen, and then I can share my screen. That's at least what it says here. Perfect. It works. Excellent. Thanks a lot for this. And you probably all see the chart here now. I've prepared 5 slides that give you a certain more concrete idea on the project. The first one is showing you what I just mentioned briefly, which is more or less the value supply chain of the electric cars industry. So at the end, at the number 4 here, you have some of the battery packs that are in the electric vehicles. Before the battery packs, you are producing battery cells. These battery cells are normally relatively small batteries, and as you see here on that symbol, like in a Tesla Model S, there are like 9,500 of these small AAA batteries in this that are then being built, linked together for a battery pack. In these battery cells, this is now step 2 here, you have cathodes, you have anodes in it, and you have a separator, and you have a so-called electrolyte liquid. You know, we are talking at the moment about lithium-ion batteries, and there's still a liquid element in this. And to produce these elements, you need lithium. And lithium here, what you need especially is lithium hydroxide. And this is in a few months' time, we expect in 6 to 9 months from now, this will be a significant bottleneck. And you can imagine when you have bottlenecks in the global car industry, and you're competing with the Chinese car makers and everything comes out of China, that you have to be extremely careful to make sure that you get your own supply regionally. And that's, by the way, also a very interesting side aspect of the COVID crisis. Yeah, we have realized that some of you might know that the car supply chain is extremely complex. So all these parts that are forming the final car are coming from all over the world, extremely complex supply chains. So the car makers have realized that they cannot really change the existing supply chain, but for everything new and the new hybrid and electric vehicle technology, this is a completely new setup. This they want to do regionally, which means in North America, we need all of these elements that you see here. We need the battery cells production, which is with companies like Samsung, SD Innovation, LG Chemicals, etc. You see there a lot of Asian names also here, of Asian companies that are building then companies and producers in the United States. All of this must be regionally. The next one is just showing you to a certain extent what we are aiming to build up. What you see here is a large lithium hydroxide factory out of China. This one is 150 kilometers next to Shanghai. This is one of the most modern factories of this style. Actually, there are only around 15 in the world, so 15. And we will need probably hundreds of this, right? So we are still at a very early stage industry, and we want to be a front runner for this industry, start to build up the first factory, which will have the size that you see here. But also, when the first one is there, we are talking about an industry that will be growing with 25% per year for the next 30 years. So this first one that we are talking about today is a start. We are actually convinced that we are then adding additional production lines next to the existing one. And on the right side, you see the final product. These are actually the bags of lithium hydroxide, which looks a little bit like a white powder. Here I would like to give you some details about how the factory, how the project is looking like. So a general project overview. Yeah? You see the size of this, and your calculation was perfectly right, 25 acres. So the size we are looking for is then around 350 times 250 meters. However, the area can be bigger. We are actually happy to find larger areas because we strongly believe that we will expand after a few years. You have shown, Eric, you have shown a timing which is mostly for the site selection, which should happen, and you are right on this, probably in the next 12 months. We are then in parallel preparing everything around financing and several other points, and the engineering, of course, the feasibility studies, etc., so that we are aiming to start a production by early 2023. So this is a project that is very ambitious, but you can imagine that in the global electric vehicles industry, we expect that the strong growth is coming more or less from 2022, 2023 on. So we want them to be really in the center of this. We will have around 500 workers during the construction, and we will have in this first phase around 120 workers during the operations. We are expecting, that is currently the planning, that we are producing 24 hours a day in 3 shifts. We need water. We are then cleaning the water and sending it back. We need a power line, but this will be no problem for anyone, I assume, who is here in the line. We also need natural gas. Yeah, we need around 850 terajoule per year. And one thing is becoming more and more important for us that I already want to mention here. When you look at the car industry, everything is turning more and more into CO2-free, emission-free economics. So over the time, we will need that our energy production comes from renewable sources. We need wind energy, we need solar energy, we need thermal energy, things like this. Hydro energy is also fine, which we also have in Canada. This is very important in a certain perspective of a few years' time. And the biggest challenge probably with all these kind of projects that we are also aiming, and this is why I want to make this also very transparent from the beginning, is transportation costs and also tailings that we are dealing with. Because in the worst case, and there are many options how to make this better, but in the worst case, we would transport around 300,000 tons of our lithium raw material, which is a sort of gravel format, into the factory. And we are then producing out of this 25,000 tons of the pure end product, the lithium hydroxide, which shows you that there will be around 250,000 tons of other materials that we have to deal with. And we are assuming that most of this will be sold to neighboring industries, which is an important aspect. Yeah, so when you are asking for a perfect location, it would be very good to have, for example, a cement factory or construction specialist construction factories in the surrounding of our plant, because these are the typical buyers of the other side products outside of the lithium hydroxide. But in our planning phase that we are in at the moment, we always have to assume that there will be also some waste material remaining that for whatever reason we cannot sell. So there's nothing, we have these discussions, of course, also in Canada, we have them in Germany. There are several categories, of course, of these tailings in terms of any kind of risk they might be posing for the environment, right? And we are most likely in the lowest category. For example, in Germany, we have like 4 categories between 0, which is the lowest one, and 4, which is highly risky. And we are probably either falling still under 0 or we will go into 1. But this is a topic where it is very important, of course, to deal with the environmental authorities to get these discussions started as soon as possible. And of course, it would be very interesting for us to have a good transportation connection. As you are hearing now, we have to transport goods, right? So in a perfect world, we have a railway connection there, or even a shipping connection, right? We are open. We don't have any preference, but I said we are coming from the Great Lakes. So from our area there, we can ship our goods on the Great Lakes, let's say, for example, directly to Michigan, and then we can load them there on trucks, but preferably we would load them on the train, because this is normally the lowest cost option. Let me say a few words about financing. And Eric, you mentioned what we initially said, $350 million of investment. You see here on that chart actually 400 million. The reason for this is that during our work in the feasibility studies, yeah, we always see that is a normal aspect, right? You come out of a perfect world where you have your expectations, but normally the cost isn't always turning larger. So we are expecting at the moment that we will have full capex investment costs of around 400 million. We are currently in discussions with different groups. On the one hand, we have very large project financing partners who would come up with the equity share of this together with our own company. We actually expect that 1/3 of this 400 million, 1/3 each, will be provided via equity, via debt, and also via subsidies and any kind of support programs that might be available, which is, by the way, one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier that lithium is now being considered a critical rare earth metal in the US. So programs are being set up at the moment to support the production of lithium products. So next to the equity part, we are currently negotiating with several large banking institutions who want to set up the senior debt consortium. So we expect that we're getting around $150 million of senior debt for this project. And on the subsidy side, I've just phrased it here as a subsidy. One of the reasons why I am currently here in Europe is, and Alison mentioned this before, look, when you're producing these lithium products for the battery cells, you have to see where the battery cell industry and the car producers are. At the moment, I would say that the Chinese car producers were the first one to be active in the electric vehicles front, and the large European and German car producers are now catching up. So when you're here on the European market, you read every day a lot about electric vehicles. Last month, in the month of August, of all newly registered cars, 13% were electric cars. So this was a record value, and this will increase in the next few years to 25%. So the reaction of this is, of course, that the European Union is setting up a lot of subsidy programs to build up the skills on the continent for the whole value chain. And we are still working on it, mostly in Canada, because this is our mining home market. Yeah, there the government is working on setting up subsidy programs as well for the space. And one of my questions, more or less, to the group here is also, when you are looking if our concept here might be interesting for you, keep in mind that you maybe think a bit how you could support us to a certain extent in this field. It is simply important because on the pure operating costs, I have to be honest, neither in Europe nor in North America we can compete with the Chinese. So in order to get a promising business case and to really get the regionalization of the value chain of electric vehicles done, yeah, we need to work now at the beginning, at least, with some kind of regional state support on this. And the last point, very briefly, is a short overview of the cost breakdown for our capex for this 400 million that I mentioned. And you see a lot of this, of course, goes into construction. And Eric, you are right. We are looking for a greenfield site mostly, because what we are setting up is so far only has been set up in China. And there's one of the so-called lithium converters, these factories, currently under construction in Australia. But you will not find such a machinery and such a factory anywhere else in the world at the moment. So this is also high tech. This is new technology we are applying here. These are new processes we are applying here. And this is why the process equipment and the construction costs are the key cost elements that we are seeing, of course, in the setup. So I think this, I hope this gave you a good impression already. I stop sharing now and back to you, Eric, and maybe there are already some more questions coming up. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you, are you able to see my screen again? There we go.
Yes.
So thank you so much. I mean, that answers a lot of the questions here. So we'll kind of move through these quickly and get to our listeners' questions. But in terms, am I correct in assuming the key motivation is purely the growth of the industry, which is motivating you to put in these facilities? Is that correct?
Yeah, it is actually the growth of the industry, but it is much more than this. You know, we have now the Corona crisis still ongoing, but don't forget, we had discussions about the climate change for the past years, and these discussions are ongoing. We can have basic debates about the benefits of electric vehicles, but to cut it short, we need to electrify our transportation. This will be very important, that we need to combine it at one point of time with renewable energies. And we have a very strong group of investors also in our company and also on the way forward. And all these people really believe in the future of e-mobility, so that we are at the beginning of a huge trend, yeah, and we want to be with this from the beginning.
Okay, awesome. So do you guys currently have any other operations or locations that are under your portfolio, or is this your first major project?
This is in this company that we are running at the moment, the first major project. We have, of course, our mine development in Canada. We had other things in other countries, but we stopped it to fully focus at the moment really on the key markets we want to be in, which is North America and Europe, and to work on setting up this plant.
Okay, great. And you talked to me a little bit yesterday about long-term plans beyond this facility. You had mentioned possibly battery production, things like that. Could you kind of explain or go into that in a little detail?
Well, there are two elements to this. Yeah, one element is the pure increase of the need for our product lithium hydroxide. You know, to just put it into context, at the moment there's a need for around 300,000 tons per year of this product. In a few years' time, it will be 1 million tons. Yeah? So this is going to increase more than 3 times in a very short period of time. What we are aiming to set up will have a production capacity between 20 and 25,000 tons per year. So in relation to a world market currently of 300,000 and the future world market of 1 million. And you can imagine when this first one is running and when the market is continuing to grow, yeah, we would like to increase this and eventually probably produce 100 to 150,000 tons of this lithium hydroxide and become really a global player with this. And this is just a starting point for this. Yeah? And we need a country and a region that can do this with us, that can grow with us, that also has the specialists, because the employees are, we need chemistry and process technology experts for this, right? And this is more or less what we are looking for. It might also be at a later stage that we are going a bit up the value chain, but this is not really in a concrete planning yet. But it might be, I've realized this at a site visit yesterday in Germany, in an old chemical industry area in Germany. The guys there are trying to attract all elements of the electric vehicles supply chain. So they want to have the battery cell producers, and actually they have one US-Chinese battery cell producer called Farasis, who has decided to put the European cell factory there. They want to have the lithium hydroxide production there. They want to have the cathode production. One of the big cathode producers is BASF, the German company. There's Johnson Matthey, which is a North American company. So it might even be that one of the communities here joining have a certain idea of building a technological or a chemistry park around the future of electric vehicles, and this could be also a very interesting combination for us.
Awesome. The next several questions, you've done a tremendous job of answering them with your slide deck, so we can skip down to kind of number 9. You shared with me kind of the importance of rail and actual potentially port access. Can you kind of describe that and its importance in the success of the facility?
Yeah, the importance here is the following. As I mentioned before, when you are dealing eventually with the car industry, costs are the key important thing. We believe that based on a need for regionalization, we will be able to produce at slightly higher costs than our Chinese or other Asian competitors, but it can only be slightly higher. Transportation costs is a key element next to the, of course, next to labor costs and energy and gas costs of our overall production costs. So we have to find ways to keep the transportation costs as small as possible. And when we are looking at this, at our Canadian and European markets, I have to say that the cheapest way of transportation for this kind of tonnage is usually the railway. So I would say that the key element is a railway access. Yeah? Shipping is also relatively low cost. However, with shipping, you see that the world is getting hotter and hotter, and the rivers are losing some of their depths, which is actually very important for shipping when you're dealing with container ships. Yeah, so this is probably less probable. And trucks are, at least on the European market, much more expensive per ton than trains are. This is why our key focus would be on a direct connection to a train network.
So skipping down even further, because again, you've answered a lot of these questions. In terms of building your facility, a lot of the communities have connections with build-to-suit firms and things like that. Are you currently in negotiations or talking with any build-to-suit firms for building the project?
We started these kind of discussions currently actually with European and with Asian possible partners. Asian is to a certain extent because you have in Japan quite some knowledge on setting up these kind of chemistry plants, right? And we are most likely going to work together with a so-called EPC contractor who is doing the engineering, the procurement, and the construction out of one hand. We are also still open for further partners here. So if there's a community or online that says we have a great EPC contractor, great construction companies in our area, it would be a very interesting element in our decision making also to find local or regional partners who can do this with us. We are still open for this.
Awesome. Question 14 is referred to also by Mickey from Kansas. And Mickey was asking, since it's such a specialized industry and process, what kind of specialized training will you guys need in your labor force? And would you need assistance from the states in helping train those employees?
It's a very interesting question. Two points to this. When we have qualified people who come out of the chemistry industry or the engineering processing industry, we will most likely be very much able to work with them, to give them the additional training that is necessary to work in such a factory. And we are also creating know-how then together with this workforce, which is very important, because we will have people eventually who then in a growing industry can work everywhere in the world if they like to, yeah, which helps you in the internationalization eventually of a certain area or region. So we will be conducting these kind of trainings. We will probably cooperate them with partners from Australia and maybe also a handful of experts from China to get this done, at least for the beginning. And then we can train once we have the skills there on board. We can train ourselves. The second element that I would like to also focus on, which I haven't mentioned before, when you are setting up a new industry, it is very important to have more and more scientific cooperations. We would be very thankful to cooperate with universities, with research science centers that would then help us to further improve our processes, because as I said, it's a young industry. You get started with the things that are working, but you have to improve this. And we will also create then together with these scientific organizations additional know-how, make our factory eventually better, yeah, and really also lay the groundwork for a successful expansion of what we are going to do.
Okay, great. So in terms of the number of employees, you've talked about the number of employees. What's kind of the breakdown, and do you have salary requirements, or what kind of pay scales those employees would be securing?
We are currently actually, in our study modus, you're working with a lot of assumptions. So in our assumptions, we are working currently with average salaries of around $100,000. Yeah? And don't put too much on this at the moment. What I want to show is that these are qualified and skilled jobs, right? And we will still fine tune these numbers, and will also then fine tune exactly how many people in which category we will need. I was just giving you the summary by saying more or less engineering processing and chemistry processing.
Okay, so I'm glad you alluded to this earlier, and I love whenever we can talk about putting linked industries together. You mentioned access or proximity to a concrete manufacturer. In terms of in terms of that, are there any other types of clusters, and what type of customers are you looking for to be in close proximity to expand your customer base?
Yeah, let me answer your second question first. Eventually, okay, we will sell our product to producers of cathodes and to battery cell producers. However, it is not that important that we have these in an area, let's say, of 2 hours or 3 hours drive. Look, if we manage to get to a location in 1 day's time, we are fine, and we will manage this in the US. And I'm pretty confident on this, because we will see a huge growth also of battery cell factories in the US. And I'm not too worried about this topic. but it is all in development because the whole industry is just shaping up at the moment, yeah, which makes it a bit more risky, but also a bit more interesting in this segment. On your first question, which kind of industries could be supportive for us? You know, we will be depending a little bit also on partners. What I have done those past 2 days. Let me maybe give you an example. I was meeting with a city in Germany, and the city was then also discussing with two or three of the larger firms in the field of construction in that city. And two of the firms were then joining the meeting with us, and we were then explaining what kind of residual materials we will have, and we were then all starting brainstorming about where this could be used for them, because these answers are never that clear. That we say, look, we have, for example, aluminium silicates, yeah. It is never that clear that one company says we buy this now because we do this and this with that. In real life, it is never really so easy. So what is a realistic solution is, for example, that the construction company comes and says, we can use this because we're using it for that specific type of construction. We mix it together with something else that we're having, and then we're having a perfect material. And it's good for them because they get the cheaper raw materials from us, and it's good for us because we do not have any costs for the tailings then, yeah, where you have otherwise significant costs per ton of disposal, which is very clear and understandable, right? And these kind of cooperations have to be developed to a certain extent. So if there's someone here interested, and I try to give these examples, so maybe you keep it in mind, you discuss maybe with a construction company, or maybe also with waste disposal experts in your community area, and I'm pretty sure that they will then ask, yeah, we have some ideas what could be done, and maybe the guys can send us a detailed description of what kind of residual materials they have, and then we can make up our minds what could be done with this. So I want to say it's not that easy that I just say it's this and this and that. There are several opportunities, and we will also depend on a certain cooperation with local partners to leverage these opportunities.
Okay, great. So Ashley, and in my discussions with Brad and yourself, been a high degree interest of Michigan and Ohio in terms of this facility, along with Germany, or over in Europe. When we broadcast and sent this out to some of our partners throughout the United States in terms of communities, I was amazed about how many people had shown an interest in this project. Are you limited currently on this facility to that location, or if the right location somewhere in the United States came available, would they be able to submit and propose to you and show the value of what their area could bring to you?
We are really open to any kind of new location. Yeah, we are still in the screening, and we have approached it in a way that we went more or less to the most, let's say, logical locations. Which is when you are located at the Great Lakes and you are dealing with the car industry, you think automatically, of course, of Michigan, Ohio, Europe. This is the natural thought that you are coming up with. But this does not mean that this is automatically the best solution. Yeah? Based on what I was trying to present, if there are people who are saying, look, it would fit perfectly to us because of this and this and this reason, then we look into this. It's just important. We will have a feedstock of materials that we need to transport from the Great Lakes, most likely then to the location of our plant. Yeah, and we have to keep these transport costs to a certain extent under control. If we get this done, we are very flexible.
Okay, great. And finally, before we get to the questions some of our listeners have asked, if you could put your finger on one point, there's always a tipping point, in terms of what a company really wants to see in a location, the perfect location. Can you describe that, or right now is it too early to decide what that tipping point is that's going to help you decide this is the right choice over another?
It is probably still too early because it is a combination of different factors. Like the past 2 days, as you mentioned, when I was in Germany, I have visited 5 different locations in Eastern Germany. I've visited those because Eastern Germany is becoming, together with Poland, which is just at the border to Eastern Germany, is becoming a sort of European hub for the cathode production and for the battery cell production. So there's a certain use in the arguments that we are trying to become a part of this hub, to be relatively close to the customers. It is not urgently needed, but it has some advantages. So in one of the locations, you would now say it was perfect because it has a huge solar and wind energy plant next door. Yeah? We could simply buy into this and already have some renewable energies, which is good for our CO2 balance. Yeah? Another location had its own port, which was a port at the river Elbe, which goes to Hamburg. So then we can ship our goods from Canada to Hamburg and from there down the river. Yeah? Other locations are centrally well located, like I was in Bitterfeld-Wolfen, and there's a former chemical park. This used to be the key center for the chemicals production in former Eastern Germany and most parts of Eastern Europe, actually. And after the reunification in Germany, this park was completely rebuilt. So you have the most modern chemistry companies in there. This also has an advantage because we need 1 or 2 ingredients, yeah, for our process that comes normally from other chemistry companies. We can transport this, but if you have a chemistry company next door that can just put it through a pipe to you, is also very interesting. So you see, there's no perfect world where we would say all of these points are being matched at once. Yeah? But we are trying to get as closely as possible to a situation where we say out of the 6, 7, 8 key questions, and I outline some of them, the more we have fulfilled at the location, the better it is for us.
Okay, great. So with that said, let's transfer over to our Q&A from our communities. First question I have is from Mickey, but Mickey, I think we answered that. It's basically about rail access and the importance of it. The next question we've got from Sheldon Mudd. And Sheldon is in Northeast Nevada. And actually one of our active communities that we work really closely with. I actually drove about 1,500 miles touring the state with Sheldon, learning about all the opportunities there. Very heavy in gold production. I believe it's 80% of the entire world's gold is out of there. So there seems like his interest is the infrastructure that's there to help a project like yours. His question is, will 100% of your lithium be sourced from your existing deposit, or will you be importing lithium from other deposits around North America?
It's a very good question. Most likely the answer is that around 50 to 60% comes from our own deposit. And we will actually want to receive another 40% from other sources. It is getting more complicated. This is why I haven't put this up myself, but the question is very good. Because when you're running such a large plant, yeah, on the one hand, you want to risk diversification. You do not want to rely just on one resource, actually. Yeah? It's always better to have two sources of material. And secondly, the impact is, where can we get this from? You said Nevada. In Nevada, there are some brine operations for lithium. It's a different kind of lithium that is being extracted there. Yeah? But we can always look into this if there are synergies. And I hope, by the way, that most of the key projects that are currently in North America, they have to go into production. Otherwise, we have huge shortages in lithium. We will already now see shortages. So we don't consider us to be in competition with other lithium producers. We actually see a lot of synergies, yeah, which is I think also the background of this question. It might therefore be that we are bringing in material from other parts of the world, actually. Hopefully it is North America, but it might also be that we're shipping, let's say, lithium spodumene concentrate from Australia, because the Australians are currently the largest producer of this material globally. Yeah? Therefore, it could be interesting to have to lower the transportation costs from Australia, even if the transportation costs from the Great Lakes might be higher.
Great. So John Robertson from Blackwell, Oklahoma, kind of asked a similar question about where in the U.S. does the raw materials come from? And if we're clarifying, most of it comes from your own mining facility in Canada. and just looking for some possible secondary sources around the U.S.
Yes.
So I've got a question from Patrick from Cleveland up on the Great Lakes. He writes, besides concrete companies, who buys the byproducts? Have you identified a list of other users? He states we have a variety of chemical operations, paint, rubber, polymers, and are there possible synergies there?
It might well be. This is what I mentioned before. We really have to discuss this with these possible partners. Actually, in the production of when you're building pipes, like let's say for glass fiber networks, yeah, just one example. In these pipes, you're also using aluminum silicates, yeah, for the stability and for some other reasons. So someone who's producing pipes, which is now not the typical construction industry, which is more a sort of chemical mixed industry, is also a very interesting partner for us. Then we might have a side product, some gypsum, and there are big gypsum producers in this world who would then buy our product and work further with this, refine it one or two steps further to sell them this gypsum into the world. Let's say, for example, these gypsum plates that you are using for building houses, yeah, things like this. So the answer is yes. In such an industry environment, there are most likely synergies.
Okay, great. Patrick, I'm going to have Patrick Amalia. If you could raise your hand, might bring you on. You have a couple of questions. All right, Patrick.
Good afternoon.
All right, if you could introduce yourself and where you're from, and you can kind of just ask your questions. I think they're a little bit more technical.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I was just curious, what kind of fire suppression do we need when we're looking at the building requirements here? I understand that lithium can be highly flammable if it's not submerged in petroleum jelly or something similar. I'm not a chemist. I'm an economic development guy. I don't know that. But I do know that my fire department may have some questions. Is there anything that I need to consider in terms of fire suppression?
Most likely not. We have looked at this, but probably a bit too superficially so far in our feasibility study work. We haven't seen anything that is of a significant risk, because eventually what we are doing is, yeah, we are more or less, you have to imagine this as a sort of crystallization processes that we are working through. It's a crystallization and filtering processes. There's never the pure lithium product itself, where you say maybe out of the pictures of batteries or so that they are catching fire. There is no pure lithium product in our production. We are always working with lithium oxide, for example, which comes out of the ground, lithium sulfate, etc., etc. I don't think that there will be anything that is tricky, but I can't give you a final answer on this yet.
Excellent, thank you. Very quickly, we have a very heavy concentration of the automotive industry here. We also have a number of electric vehicle production manufacturers starting up, but I understand that there are a variety of other types of batteries that are used within these processes. Can you tell me, like, what are some of the brands that you want to be close to? I know that the old General Motors plant in Lordstown, about a half hour away from me, has been purchased by a company called Workhorse, which is making electric trucks and things like that. Are these location drivers for you, or?
They themselves are not a location driver for us, because in our value chain, this is what I wanted to show at the beginning. When you talk to them, they are probably arguing that what we are producing, the lithium hydroxide, is 2 steps in the value chain away from them. These are things that they are buying via suppliers in between. The companies that we are looking for are either the battery cell producers, Yeah, which are then the ones who are building these cells really then for the electric truck manufacturer, or the producers of the parts of the battery cells, which are not yet strong in the US. This is coming up, but I cannot even tell you at the moment which company is planning which kind of setup, because we are at a very early stage of this industry. Yeah? And so I simply don't know. But my gut feeling is that we will see clusters. So the advantage for you is when there's a car industry producing the electric vehicles, there's a higher likelihood that there will be clusters around this where the battery cell manufacturers are going relatively close to this. I saw this now again at my German visits. You see that the battery cell manufacturers there are getting very close to the car production sites. Yeah? Now, the battery cell manufacturer, it depends now on their strategy. Some of them want to produce a cathode, which is the material where you need our lithium hydroxide, want to produce them themselves. Others are saying we are buying the cathodes from other parts of the world, which might even be China, actually. This will not happen for a long period of time because, as I outlined earlier, this production will be regionalized. But this is all still ongoing, and there's a lot of risk capital currently going into this market. And when I was talking to one of the largest battery cell manufacturers yesterday in Europe, one of the largest in Europe, they are doing 3.5 billion euros investment currently in the factory. And we were debating about how plannable this market is for him. And he said to me, to a certain extent, we are placing a bet here. Because if the car manufacturers are really not producing the electric vehicles, our full investment is lost. And this is still the risk of the industry. So we can only at the moment, and we know this risk, and we want to be early players, but we believe in this future. So my answer, and again in a nutshell, is the likelihood that our customers are settling down in your region is probably higher because you have eventually the EV manufacturers there on the ground, but the EV manufacturers are not our direct customers.
Great. Does that answer all your questions, Patrick?
It does. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome. So got a ton more questions about byproducts. I figured that would be kind of a high interest because it makes so much sense to cluster what is US gypsum wallboard a potential byproduct also, purchaser of your byproduct?
Eventually, so what is for sure is that as really most of these byproducts are these aluminum silicates. We are still working on different ways of our processing, and one of the processing options that we might apply would come up with gypsum as a byproduct at the end. It might also be that we get sort of natrium nitrate as a byproduct, which is used as a fertilizer in the fertilizer industry. But this is not yet clear. This is why the interesting element. But these are more or less all the materials that I mentioned so far that are relevant. So we are interested in getting in touch with locations relatively early, so that we can also discuss. Maybe there's an answer that one of these byproducts would be a huge problem there, or there's a reply where they're saying if you produce this byproduct, we have a buyer for this right away because you have another industry next door. This is something which makes this complex. This project a little bit complex. We really depend on the cooperation and the interaction and discussions with the communities and other local firms. But we also think that this is a big opportunity, that we can do this.
Okay, great. Mary Lily asks, and I think this alludes to where your current facility and as it relates to the Michigan and Ohio interest, how close to the lithium mines do you actually need to be when considering locations?
As I said, the transportation cost is just one element of the cost. So if someone, for example, says we have a gas pipeline just in front of the property, you can use this, you get very low gas prices, but the transportation costs are a little bit higher because it's a bit further away from the mine. We can live with this, yeah. That's more or less the answer. Look, to make this transparent for you, we are working on one business case at the moment where we are assuming that we are shipping our spodumene concentrate, which is a 6% lithium content. The rest, you would argue, is waste material, over the Atlantic to Germany. So none of the locations probably in the US would have probably higher transportation cost centers. So it will not be a deal breaker, even if you're relatively far away.
Okay, great. I've got Callie from Illinois, and she's just kind of wanting to expand on the rail and the usage of the rail. Does the rail need to be on site to the facility or close proximity?
Close proximity is probably sufficient. On-site is a huge advantage. It is simply, of course, it always costs you extra money when you have to change them from the train onto a truck to bring this from the truck into your warehouse, right? The easiest is if you can really connect your warehouse right away to the train. Yeah? And again, this is an element then of keeping costs down.
Okay, great. Got the last question from Mickey again. In terms of the importance or ability to have the facility locate within a foreign trade zone, do you perceive that as a valuable asset for you?
It is a very interesting question. The answer is most likely yes. I don't have a clear answer because we haven't considered this yet, because we don't have this in Canada and in Europe, actually. And it can be a very interesting element for us. Yes.
Okay, great. That's all our questions. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to put them in. We want to get them all answered. I can answer yours, Joanne. She's asking if we're going to be issuing an RFP. Over the next couple of days, look for an email from us for all the attendees. We'll also be issuing this out to the rest of our communities across the nation. It'll come in the form of a job form, so everybody's information is brought in consistently. You'll be able to upload any schematics or brochures on particular sites and buildings and any packets of information. But yeah, we try to make that really seamless and organized so that Dirk can kind of dive in and take a look before he decides on any kind of travel outside of Switzerland. So that's great. I want to thank you again, everybody, for all your questions. This is Joanne and the rest of our listeners. This is the type of submission form you'll be receiving from us, and we'll be forwarding that to Dirk for his review, and then he'll be feeding us back and saying, you know, I found these sites very interesting. I'd like to explore them more, and we'll try to keep everybody as up to date on the decision process and where we're going. Like to conclude with, if you have any questions, I'm going to post this up. This is our contact information, my email, my phone number. You can go back through either the recording transcript, or you can screen capture this for your own records if you'd like to get in touch with us. Ashley's coordinating most of the research and submissions, so you can contact her directly at ashley@gslisolutions.com. If you want to call her on the phone, it is 469-778-2606. She's at extension 6 here in our company. A good resource for everything, not just Project Mineral Rocks, but all of our 86 active projects can be found at www.gslliprojectportal.com. And Brooke, if you'd like to post that link again, you can easily click that, fill out the form, and we'd be glad to get in touch with you as quick as possible. But with that said, we are well past our hour. We're at 12. We're about an hour and 15 minutes. So Dirk, I apologize, but I really do want to thank you for taking the time. Hopefully we've saved you a tremendous amount of time of answering these questions. We'll get this recording up in less than 24 hours, and we'll have the transcript up in less than 48 hours and the submission form. For all the communities and companies and site locators that also joined us today, thank you so much for taking your time out to listen to this project. And I hope some of your communities can bring new opportunities for them to consider and to take a look at. And so with that said, I want to say goodbye till our next Prospect Live event. And we're signing off here from our headquarters in Dallas. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dirk.
Thank you very much. Good evening.